This one may be a little bit different than the usual type of video that I put out, but it was something that was on my mind a little bit, and I thought I'd talk about it here. I stumbled across this book that was called "When the Brain Lost Its Mind." I think that's the title, or "Why the Brain Lost Its Mind." Anyway, I'll look it up and post a link in the video description. But it was talking about. It seemed to get positive ratings from the regular, ordinary lay people who read it. I haven't finished the whole entire thing. I checked it out from the library. But it was talking about, I think the professionals that gave it low ratings online was because the book makes explicit mention of the brain and the mind. You know, the mind being different than the brain and all that other kind of thing, which, I mean, to me, I kind of understand where they're coming from, because the mind, the mystical mind, the thing that makes me like certain types of music, or makes me enjoy certain things, or creates all kinds of mystical feelings from time to time. I mean, that is a product of the brain. The brain is a very physical, thoughts themselves require a biological, material type process that has to happen. I mean, if I was in a car accident and I injured myself brain-wise, if I was in a motorcycle wreck and my head hit something and it damaged my brain, it would distinctly alter, if I was lucky and survived it without being paralyzed or something horrifying like that, it would actually alter me maybe in some ways. I mean, there are people with brain damage who become completely different. In fact, there was an interesting case I read about a guy who had some kind of brain damage thing, and all of a sudden, strangely enough, he was able to play classical piano. If I can find the link, I'll post it, of course. But what it was talking about was about the field of psychiatry and how little we understand about the mind and the brain itself. In fact, it opens up in the chapter at the very beginning of a guy who seemed completely normal in a lot of ways. In fact, in every facet of his life, he was able to work, he was able to do all those things, but he believed all kinds of crazy types of conspiracies, like if he put sugar in his coffee, that's how they were able to listen to him and spy on him, or if he turned on the television to a certain channel, that was the channel they were using to listen to him, and other types of things like that. That wasn't just the entire synopsis of his abnormalities, but ultimately, there was these quirks or whatever it was about him, but under CAT scans and under, all those other things, they weren't able to find anything actually wrong with him. That for a lot of years in the psychiatric field, they believed, and in some cases it's actually a concrete reality, like with my OCD, which is what I was going to talk about ultimately in this video. But they were saying that for a lot of years they believed that mental illness itself was caused by problems in the brain, or that there was something in the brain that wasn't functioning properly, or something like that. In the case of OCD, there was a book called Brainlock that actually showed scans of people with OCD, in which I don't suffer with it near as badly as I used to, but there was different areas of the brains that were activated, under those things. In fact, they make an interesting comparison to what really kicked off the field of mental health at one point in history was syphilis, because there were so many different types of behaviors, so many different types of bizarre things that could be written off as, well, he has syphilis, so that's the answer. As a matter of fact, it was called the Great Imposter from time to time, because anytime you were acting weird or anytime you were doing strange things, they would just say, well, if you had it, of course, I think, or they would say, well, it's syphilis that's causing that kind of thing. I never hear that word that I don't think of that old British sitcom, wildly inappropriate humor for today's world, but it was called Blackadder. There's a scene where the Baldrick character, he says, "You can't sack me, Mr. Adder. I've been in your family for generations." And he says, "So has syphilis." And I always think of that line when I read that book. But there was also the diagnosis of hysteria. It's a very interesting book that mainly chronicles the history of mental health and those other kind of things, but it ultimately leads to the conclusion there's a lot about the mind that we don't know about. There's a lot about the mind that's still a mystery. Of course, if you follow the news about artificial intelligence, which I've been kind of following for some strange reason, maybe it's part of my OCD here, where there was a recent case where a guy had brain implants that was confined to a wheelchair after an accident, And due to some type of brain implant, some kind of breakthrough in science, he was able to walk again. He was actually able to walk for the first time in 20 years after being paralyzed from a serious accident, which I think is a great thing. I mean, I can't think of anything, outside of a cure for cancer or something like that, or a cure for multiple sclerosis. I can't think of anything greater that could be accomplished in the field of science than people who are paralyzed from the waist down to the neck down being able to walk again, to be able to do that again. I think that's a wonderful thing. It would be even better if it was widely available to everybody once they figure it out, but I don't want to wander off the topic here. And what I was thinking about was there was a book I read way back which gave me a whole lot of insight into why I think I actually developed a drinking problem. It was one of many factors. I've talked about other factors before, but when I was about 13 or 14 years old, I first started noticing it. And it wasn't, puberty is a very confusing, miserable time anyway. It's funny, whenever I want to talk about how wonderful life was in the 90s, I'm thinking about MTV, and I'm thinking about the girls back then, and I'm thinking about all the other things I miss, but I don't miss being a neurotic teenager that was prone to all kinds of mood swings and other things, and having severe OCD. My OCD got really severe during my teenage years, but I first started noticing it when I was 13 or 14. Whenever I would go outside, like if I went to school and I got home from school, I had to shower, but if I went back outside again, I needed to shower again. There was something about going outside needing to clean up again, and of course, in the household, everybody was giving me grief about this. What the hell's wrong with you? You just had a shower 2 hours ago. Now you're jumping back in the shower again. When I would walk my dog in the afternoons, I would have to walk around the block exactly 3 times. And then I had to go to another section, and I had to walk around there exactly 3 times. And I would even count each time we went around the thing. In fact, it's a little bit embarrassing for me to talk about this, but I kind of feel it is important for people out there who do suffer with this problem. If I didn't say it out loud when I got around the block, like if I didn't get around the block and say 1 or 2 or 3, I'd have to go around 3 more times. There were certain things, like when I was coming up the stairs to the apartment complex at the time where we were living, if I got a funny feeling, I'd have to walk back down the stairs, and I'd have to walk back up the stairs again, and I'd have to walk back down the stairs and walk back up the stairs again. I had certain things like that. I would count numbers in my head. I would repeat certain phrases in my head over and over and over again. Now you dump that on top of a teenager who, I'm pretty sure a lot of us could attest that when you're a teenager, you're moody, you feel like you're an idiot all the time, you feel like everybody's watching you all the time, and you just feel like you're the center of attention that you don't want to be. I think somebody summed it up best when they said they wanted to get to the nearest wall and melt into the wall and vanish. And that was my teenage years, But the OCD was just almost crippling during that time. And I remember the very first time I drank, I won't go into a lot of detail about it, like an AA speaker meet or some shit like that. I didn't even get intoxicated. I remember I drank a little bit with some friends of mine, and the OCD was like, it was gone. The need for the weird rituals, the need for the counting the numbers, the need to wash my hands 100 times a day until the point my skin was dry year round on my hands, and all that other stuff, it was gone. It was just, it was like it was never there. Part of the overjoyed feeling I had with drinking, part of the euphoria I felt the very first time I tried alcohol, there was also that utter liberation in the fact that I didn't have the OCD anymore. Now, granted, the package that comes with being a teenager that I've already talked about on here, the feeling uncomfortable, the feeling like you're the center of attention, feeling like you're an idiot every time you say the wrong thing, or, feeling like you're being judged for every little move you make, or every little, if I just said something in class, if I gave the wrong answer or something like that, I just felt like a complete, utter moron, and I felt like everybody was looking at me. That kind of feeling that you get as a teenager was already bad enough, and that was gone. That was just completely 100% gone when I drank. And I do realize, looking back on it now, in the early years of my life, especially the teenage years of my early 20s, that a lot of the time when I was drinking to get rid of those feelings. But it wasn't just getting rid of those feelings, it was getting rid of the OCD. The OCD was really terrible for me. And I noticed when I drank, I didn't have that OCD. I didn't have that desire to count things. I didn't have that desire to perform these weird rituals where I would have to do everything a certain number of times. Or I didn't have to have, the books I was reading didn't have to sit on this table, and the books that I'd already read had to sit on this bookshelf. And if they got mixed up, it was a big catastrophe that was going to happen, and I had to do something about it to avert the catastrophe. That was gone. And I remembered at the time when I got Brainlock and I was reading about it, and I was thinking, well, holy shit. Because I really didn't know what was wrong with me during that time period. And I don't think I could ever stress enough what it felt like to not know what was wrong with me. You know, I knew that it was not normal to want to count 3 times around the block when I would walk my dog. I knew it was not normal to walk around another block 3 exact times and have to walk 6 times if I didn't count it out loud. I knew those things were not normal, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I thought that there was just something really fucked up and twisted about me in my head, and I was afraid. Well, of course, my family wouldn't have had the money anyway, but I was afraid that if I ever sought professional help for something like that they would say to me, you know, ooh, Jesus Christ, you know, you got this wrong with you, and it's going to get worse, and, you know, and we're going to lock you up, and all that other kind of thing. I really, truly did not know, because I did develop hypochondria around that same time period. I remember anytime that seasonal allergies would kick in, I'm using that from an example, and I would get a bit of a sore throat or a scratchy throat, I knew I was going to get pneumonia. Or anytime I would get an aching joint, I knew I had bone cancer. And, you know, everybody around me, you know, was giving me the same old, you know, well, you know, what the fuck's wrong with you? You know, what's wrong with you? There's nothing wrong with you. What's the matter with you? Pull yourself together here, you know. So I tried to bury it, I tried to hide it, and I tried to not let people know that I was doing those kinds of things. Of course, it's kind of hard when you have to perform those weird rituals, you know, in order to, you know, but it's kind of hard to hide that. But it was a real struggle to me. And when I picked up the book Brainlock, I was just relieved. I can't tell you how much relief I was feeling in there, because there were certain weird things that didn't apply to what you see OCD as on the television. On the television, I don't know if anybody remembers that TV series Monk, you know, the detective that has all these OCD type things. He's a neat freak, he's a germaphobe, and all those other kind of things. But there were other weirder things that would plague my brain. Other weird things like if I walked, if I went to there's an example of this in the book. I'll just use the example from the book because I can't think of a specific one in front of me right now. But there was a lady who suffered with OCD. Every time she went into an old building, or anytime she went into a funeral home, she felt great anxiety after she left, because she felt she had carried some uncleanliness type thing from the funeral home. She'd have to go home. She'd have to take 2 or 3 showers back to back. She'd have to wash all of her clothes. She'd have to scrub the entire apartment from top to bottom, because she felt like she had brought some bad thing with her from the funeral homes or from an old museum or something like that. And it was just such a relief to me at the time when I was reading this book. I thought, holy shit, this is what I've had plaguing me. This is what I've had bothering me. This is what I've had screwing me up. This is one of the reasons why I had so much difficulty learning anything in school, because I was so eat up with all these fucked up compulsions to, you know, I got to go wash my hands. I picked a pencil up off the floor. I got to wash my hands 2 or 3 times. My book bag touched the floor. You know, I got to scrub it off. I got to do something about it. Of course, I would have fit right in if a COVID pandemic had happened back then. But it was really mind-blowing for me. And when that happened, I made the terrible mistake of sharing in an AA meeting that I was wondering. I shared aloud at the time. I was kind of new to the thing when it happened. I shared aloud, I wonder if there's a correlation between OCD and addiction. You know, if there's a possibility that when we do certain things with addiction, you know, it's a byproduct of OCD, and you can imagine how that went. You got all these stupid fucking old-timers with their whole, you know, oh, when I got here, you know, and somebody tried to think they were smarter than all the rest of us, they were told to sit down and shut the fuck up. And if you want to hear from disease, you call on them. That's what we used to say to people like that. And of course, you know, the next person had to share. Yeah, when I got here, I read a lot of medical books, and I thought I was smart, and I had a college education that, you know, I was the top man in my field in college, and they said I could be one of the best physicists there was. I mean, even the other physicists were impressed with how knowledgeable I was, and that's how smart I was when I got to AA. And, I had to give it up. I had to give it up to God. My pride, the same old fucking stupid fucking horse shit that you hear in every meeting. As a matter of fact, I'm convinced that AA is not interested in people getting well. I'm convinced that AA is not interested in science may one day find an answer, like it says in their horseshit literature. They're not interested in that at all. They're only interested in cult speak, cult talk, and reinforcing the horseshit dogmatic beliefs that they have been convinced of themselves that makes them miracles of this world. But it occurred to me, because I felt at that time, being kind of new to the cult and everything, I felt like I had done the wrong thing. And it occurred to me that the OCD about not drinking kicked in. And it was one of my difficulties, I think, in the early days of AA, because I got obsessive compulsive about drinking again. Must not drink again, must not drink again. I can't drink again. No matter what, I never drink again. I'll never drink again. I can't drink again. It was, I can't do it. I can't do it. It was that panic-driven type of ritualized behavior that I had with my OCD when I was a teenager. And I got OCD about AA in some ways. I had to look at the book. I had to say the prayer. I had to be at the meeting. If I was late to the meeting, something terrible was going to happen to me. It made my mental health issues far worse. It made them a whole lot worse, I think. And it was one of the reasons it drove me to multiple relapses in the early days. And of course, I don't have to go into detail about how you feel when you relapse. You feel like you failed. You feel like you fucked up. You feel like you're low in the dirt. And of course, the cult is right there to magnify your fears and insecurities and make them even worse. But I can tell you this right now. I'm convinced today that my OCD in my younger years kind of is what set my propensity for becoming a problem drinker into motion. And I would have never been able to figure that out with a stupid fucking fourth step talking about, self-will and being in fear and wanting to run the show and all that other stupid shit that the fourth step claims to do with its causes and conditions. I was able to kind of correlate and figure that out on my own after I had left AA. And how did I do it? I did it through this thing that AA hates. It's called self-knowledge. That's right, by researching it and looking it up. That's how I was able to kind of figure that out. I'm not saying that the sole reason why I became a problem drinker had to do with my OCD. There's a lot of different reasons why I drank. And one of them was because I enjoyed the freaking feeling of drinking. I loved that buzz in the old days. I loved to feel that buzz, that release. I loved to, put my headphones on and listen to some good music while I was buzzing really good. I mean, it was just a euphoric, wonderful feeling, which is AA. You can't ever admit you had any fun drinking. I used to see people in AA meetings all the time. I never once had fun drinking. Never once. Very first time I picked up a drink, it was bad. Very first time, I never had a good experience drinking. Well, what the fuck did you get addicted to it for? In order to get addicted to anything, there has to be some kind of pleasure behind it, in my opinion. But anyway, chime in on the comments below in this video. Tell me if you experience anything like OCD, or if you think that any type of externalized pressure or internalized things in your life may have fueled your propensity for alcohol and drugs. Just an interesting thought. A little bit different than my usual content, but I thought I'd put that out there as food for thought. Let me know what you think, and I guess I'll see you again next week.